Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, and with me, as always, is Seth Price down there. Seth, you didn't get slammed by snow like I did. I got 3 feet of snow outside my front door. Nobody wants to go outside. I had to shovel a path for the dog to go take a leak. But you guys
No,
didn't
we
get hit as hard.
get DC. Not really. I was down there the next morning. It was nothing. Suburbs. We got a. What was nice. What happened? And I don't know if you had this on your first round. Was when the snow came down in the first round. The snow. If you didn't shovel that first day, when you're like, I'll wait for it to stop, it froze over to be ice, and we didn't warm up for like 2 weeks.
Right.
And so it was just you couldn't really shovel it unless you had professional equipment, and it was just a complete cluster. So this time you saw everybody out sort of getting rid of that first dusting, and it really was not did not have that effect. So I hope you guys. But it's funny because it reminds me when we started this podcast pre-COVID, a snow day was devastating for productivity, right? You
Right.
nobody was coming in. You're just closed, right? I remember big decisions, early days of the firm. Are we open? Are we closed? At this point, just like some schools, not all. New York had a big back and forth on this. We just sent an email the night before saying everybody's working virtually tomorrow. Speak to your supervisor, make sure you're locked in. There are very few jobs that don't have a virtual role. Whether that should be is another story, but we have it across the board. So that said, in any space, the downside of this, when you have that much snow, is while you may have productivity now, I was noticing numbers would drop because there just aren't arrests. People aren't out and about. People aren't getting injured. The family lawyers may have a bump coming out of this with people who can't, we saw this out coming out of COVID, huge bump, but it changes economics in the Northeast when these huge events take place.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, we now factor it into our annual budget that we're going to lose 1 or 2 weekends of arrests to a winter storm. I mean, we had 2 weeks ago we had 2 feet of snow. We about a foot melted away. We just put 3 feet on top of it, so I got 4 feet of snow outside my door. We're going to lose a little of it, but then next week we've got another 20 inches coming on Tuesday. Hopefully, I'm hoping.
Another
Yeah, yeah,
God. And look, and you balance this. Look, that's why you got to look at stuff, somewhat quarterly or annually, because you also have, like, for us, month of July in Maryland, there are no arrests. All the cops are at the beach.
right.
So pick your poison.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's one of those things that you just have to, as a business owner who's been in it for a long time, you have to spot the patterns, right? You have to take a step back and say, okay, what's going on? One of the, what you wouldn't think it, but our worst week of the year, every year for the last 17 years, 4th of July week, because everybody goes away. And
Everybody goes away, and my guess is that there's, the law enforcement also takes as much vacation as possible around that time.
yeah, absolutely. So, like we will do 20% of our average weekly.
Wow.
And we'll drop 80% that 1 week. It'll spike back the next week, but like to the point where we've actually considered just closing that week and saying, "Here's an extra week off, folks. Have fun."
Wow.
Because do we gain more in culture by giving them a week off basically at the middle of the year? That is extra bonus versus having everybody work and be staring at their computers and waiting for the phone to ring. So
That sort of pivots to our next possible topic, which is when things drop, how do you make up for it? You talked a lot about offline advertising. It's very hard to get that to turn on. You can
right,
cultivate, but one of the things that I am seeing, that is I'll call it Google creep, in the sense that we were given an organic world. We had a 3-pack that was sort of the non-paid sector of Google.
right,
We we had PPC at the top, which for many has become untenable, and LSAs that in the PI space still very robust, and in certain areas make sense, certain areas don't. It's much tighter. What I am seeing, and the reason why this is sort of analogous, is I'm seeing that for a lot of people, present company included, some traffic has dropped in different areas. Google is creating a paid LSA that looks very much like the 3-pack, before the actual three pack, bringing down local numbers, pushing organic further down. As these roll out in certain markets, people are being forced to increase their percentage of money in paid search in order to, for many grow, but in certain instances just to maintain. And it sort of brings an interesting dynamic where sometimes that there are things that are cyclical, there are events like snow that take place, but as we're seeing this, there are going to be lawyers, my prediction is, that really get squeezed because paid is not for the faint of heart. Margins are smaller, and that people that have sort of survived on whether it be a remote area where just a handful of reviews or where SEO plus reviews in a local search pack have made you your money. It's one of those areas that is getting more competitive, and knowing what plan B is certainly is something that I think everybody is now dusting off, if they haven't already, just saying, hey, if I want to be able to maintain or grow, what are those levers that I could do to get me through some of those ups and downs? Because you're down 20%. You do no paid, presumably, at this moment. If you were to put a bunch of money into that July 4th paid, presumably you would help round that out,
Right.
but also bring down margins during that time.
So actually, one of the things that we're doing now is we have the eastern end of our state. Our numbers are not as robust as we would like. Our lawyer there is covering and carrying probably about a 90% capacity of the caseload. We'd like to get him up to 100% because there's profit in that. And so what we're doing is actually we're pulling back from some of the brand stuff that we're doing on YouTube with our YouTube pre-rolls, because I'm driving a ton of money into that for brand. But we've decided that in that market, we're going to pull back a little bit on the brand and repurpose that money into PPC for the 3 courthouses we want to try to grow. And we're gonna look at it. We're gonna do a 6-month run and see how that impacts our leads. And then if it's working, then we'll ramp back up the paid YouTube for brand, because we're seeing the return on the pay-per-click. At least that's the theory behind it.
Look, and the ugly reality is you're going to get a number, if this is new of recent memory, that the new numbers on pay-per-click are absurd.
Yeah.
And you're going to see numbers, particularly in the DUI space, and it may not be tenable. That's the frustrating part. And, curious to see in a future episode about that, A. But B, I think it brings to a, look, if you look at potential areas to gain cases outside of community marketing, which we've talked a lot about recently, but whether it's lead gen, which is essentially gambling, hoping you get a service, certain markets, certain types of law work.
Right.
Many, it's just, it works and then it stops working. You have paid search, you have organic, you have these different elements, but that when it comes to actual levers, we are seeing more and more that Google is forcing people to have paid as a piece of their marketing budget. I'm curious here because I know a group that was heavily TV, and they were getting lead gen lower. Let's say hypothetically you get a cost of a DUI at $2,500. I'm making that up. Not where you want to be.
Oh, God.
Right. But if you're able to charge $8 for the DUI, is that a viable model for you? Maybe, maybe not. It's not, you don't like it, not very exciting, but we're starting to see people having to make some of these hard decisions as far as, what are they going to do? Because if numbers are in certain markets dropping for a bunch of reasons, look, we see it in the PI space with Morgan coming into markets with the spend they have, a piece of market share is going there. Now, I see a lot of people who have been able to figure it out, but if you had a model that was completely, that was out there where X% of the public was going and you're getting slightly less because of that mega player, John's argument has always been, oh, well, now people are, it's an ad for people that wouldn't hire a lawyer potentially in the plaintiff space, maybe, but you're starting to see it, and again, smaller players getting squeezed. I'm curious to see what our audience is seeing.
It's interesting to me because when you think about it, like, yes, in the PI space, there is the Morgan and They are a behemoth. There's no other way to talk about it. But in my criminal space, in a section of my home state that I want to go after, I mean, I think I can make the argument in terms of brand name. I may be the Morgan. I'm not spending, but I'm the name that.
Right.
So the question then is, if I'm not the one who's going to be spending, you know, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 for case acquisition, is anybody in that market able to bear those expenses? Like, can be the Home Depot and come in and suffer and pay that $2,000 acquisition cost for the next year, knowing that my margin's gonna be shit. I'm not gonna really make money on it, but it's gonna put all the local mom and pop uh, hardware stores out of business, and then Home Depot's the only thing in town. That's me. Is that a strategy? Because there's a lot of lawyers out there that are starting to slow down because they can't afford to keep up with the need that Google is asking for, the amount that Google's asking for pay per click and LSAs, and they don't have the team in place to respond to these calls and take these calls, and so they're losing money. I mean, shit, our best two sales days are Saturday and Sunday, when I don't know another law firm in the state of Connecticut that's working Saturdays and Sundays.
Well, look, I think it's fascinating as we sort of talk about this, because the pitch of some of these sort of, I call them tier B or C private equity groups, is we know PPC, we can roll you up. And look, I've seen it. There are players that are very sophisticated that were using Wall Street money through Arizona, and particularly in the PI space, they fell on their face when it came to straight PPC. Because the Arizona firms can't really leverage the LSAs because they can't have offices around the country,
Right.
right? Whereas the private equity play, in theory, they're still working off of your Google business profile where you have a chance at the LSAs. But, it is, I don't care how good you are, trying to make a living from straight pay-per-click, not LSAs, but straight pay-per-click. I think they'll be, I would not want all of my firm's equity rolled into somebody who has that as a business plan.
I agree 100% with that. I 100%, because and the reality is PPC is not the only place that Google makes their money. I think it actually probably would be, you know, secondary to LSAs. They're probably
Well,
making more.
no, I mean, across the world, I mean, PPC is their game. LSAs is professional services compared to the entire world.
Well,
Whenever I search for, I mean, this is, whenever you search for something, how infuriating is it when you look for a brand you know? You're on vacation, you want to find your hotel or a cruise line, whatever it is. The fact that they are buying just like we do to protect their brand, and the click for sponsored, is very hard to tell the difference. I think at some point, I don't know whether it will be the antitrust suits that eventually come, but the way that they are, the original saying was "do no evil." That's clearly out the
oh,
window. They are now literally putting something out there where the average person has no idea they're clicking on a paid ad.
let
And
me
then
let me let me give you a perfect example of this. So I've got a friend of mine whose 18-year-old daughter last year wants to go see Coldplay in concert up at Foxborough. Tickets go on sale. She is on what she believes to be the Ticketmaster site. She Googles it up. Nope. She spent $3,000 to buy nosebleed seats off of a site that was out of the UK, that was a ticket reseller. The tickets hadn't even been issued yet out of Ticketmaster, and they wound up eating a $3,000 for two tickets or three tickets to go see Coldplay. And she was like, I had no idea I wasn't even on the Ticketmaster site. Everything looked like the way it was, the official home for the concert, all this
And
other stuff.
that's an extreme example. I went to buy, at our outdoor amphitheater, something that was not particularly expensive. It was probably $50 lawn seats, but through one of these things that I clicked on, that I was not savvy enough to tell the difference, because it was their own. I didn't know it was not the lawn. It was the actual end use, not the Ticketmaster of that local. It was probably like 75 or 80. They had built in $35 or $40 worth of fees on something that was easily accessible some other place.
This is why you just got to get a suite at the local amphitheater. So that
Exactly.
just makes my life so much easier. I got all the tickets coming in now, all the shows. People are all reaching out to me. When are we going to go see this show? When are we going to see that show?
What are the big shows this summer?
Alison Krauss is big. They just announced Darius Rucker with Robert Randolph, which will be a phenomenal show. And my friend, if you are watching The Voice, my friend Javier Colon, who was the winner of Voice Season 1, is back for their, challenge of the past winners. And he's good friends with Darius Rucker, and he always will show up at a local show when he's there. So I expect to be able to get maybe backstage and hang out, which would be very cool. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good shows. My son is psyched. My 14-year-old son is psyched. Weird Al Yankovic is coming.
Well, that's the one I'll come to. The rest of those guys, I don't think I've ever heard of, but like the Weird Al, I'm in.
Yeah, Weird Al will be a great show. So there's that, and yeah, I mean it'll be a good time. Some Maryland boys, OAR, are going to be playing. Yeah,
we'll get David Haskins from Carolina to come up. He's a big Weird Al fan. So
fantastic! Bring him up. We'll have a great time.
We're gonna have him up there. So what else on your mind? We're it's no longer Happy New Year. Larry David would be very clear. We're not in the New Year period anymore, right? So we're fully into 2026. I think that we look back at the first quarter of 25. We were like, thank God that quarter was gone. How are you seeing the market right now? What do you see as a business owner, both from a case acquisition and a hiring and retention perspective?
I'll talk about hiring first, because I think this is something that's really sort of interesting to me. We had a flame out with somebody who didn't make it 90 days, which is fine. If we're not the place for you, give us more than 0 notice. But we got through that, and we're hiring now. But what I find is really interesting is, in the first week of having our job posting, we got 20 applicants, and of those 20 applicants, I'd say 10 of them were worth a little deeper, conversations. 9 of them have 0 responses to our overtures, sending them a text message, sending them an email. 9.
I'm seeing the opposite in the market where I am. The market is tight enough. Amazon's layoffs, like big firms, you talk about layoffs. We have big law in our area. Government contracts slashed, right? Doge just crushed it. Government workers, I can't tell you that it's all perfect candidates, but we are seeing more velocity, less turnover than we have in a long time. That people are, just like we lived through the great resignation coming out of COVID. I'm almost feeling the opposite, that if somebody has a job, not that there's a turnover, not that people don't leave, it's not like it's 0, but what the sort of, for the most part, we are, if people have a good place being paid, at or above market, we're not seeing the movement that we did before.
I think there's a lot of people that are nervous about the state of the economy. And when you're nervous about the state of the economy, you don't want to leave a job that you can manage, that you're making good money at, and go to a new one and be the newest person on the payroll. Because if there are layoffs, the newest person is the one who gets cut. So people want to stay where they have some seniority, because they don't want to take that risk. I think that's
look, I think we paid our dues, both at BluShark and at Price Benowitz, on culture and building stickiness. So it's not like there's nothing. There are more systems in place. There's more management. There's less, owners and managers as a one-off. We've gotten very strict as far as not getting outside voices to people, all of that stuff. But I am, when I look around, and I'm going to pivot one more time before we get back to other stuff, what I am seeing, which is disheartening, particularly in my market, I'm curious whether other people are having it, is that as people are losing jobs, and in DC, it used to be recession proof. The government employed you, government contracts were in place. Everything is off the rails right now from that point of view, right? Government people forced out, and they're coming back. What I'm seeing is that people 50 and above are having a really hard time gaining employment, and forget about later 50s and beyond. It is the length of unemployment for people is soaring, A, and B, that the people that I see being successful are not going back for a job, but ending up with 2 to 4 consulting clients, often making more than they were making before without that piece. Now, it takes a certain person with that hustle to go
Right.
get those pieces and look, some expertise from the job you left, but that I am seeing real problems with the quote unquote traditional W-2 job as people age. It is scary, statistically significant within my extended circle in the DMV.
So that's that's interesting. I don't necessarily see that here, but maybe it's just the type of people that I'm exposed to. Um, I'll start out talking to my neighbors and stuff about how they are seeing. It's interesting to me. I have a few people that I know that are in their early 50s, and they are all dreading the impending golden handshake. A number of them work at banks, and they're like, I've made my way up. There's really not much further I can go. But if they cut me, they bring in somebody who's 28 at half my salary, and it's better for them because they're going to save a ton of money, and so I have to be, proactive in maintaining my relationships and being ready for the hammer to drop, and I'm doing that on the on the doorstep of having one or two kids in college, and and that they are talking about being frightened.
No, I hear you. Big law, no different. And this is the piece I never really, let's reverse engineer the big law model, right? You come in, you're an associate, you work up to an eighth year. I know it's not just eighth year now. Let's call it 8th to 12th year partner. How old are you then? Like, your prime in
Like
a law
37,
firm,
38.
right? Which means that the people who are managing people go from 37 to, let's say, 45. Not that they don't stay on longer,
Right.
but at, let's say, 37 to even 50. And what starts to happen, and I'm seeing this, is that people who exceed, like, there's an interesting or not interesting, but not positive dynamic, that when people in their mid 50s, where I happen to be, and have friends who are now aging beyond that, that the not that the people who are in those late 30s to mid 40s don't necessarily desire managing the person with that extra experience, and it puts those people in a sort of not ideal job looking at perspective.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree, and I think that's a troubling thing for the Gen Xers as we move forward.
Well, they still at least are young enough that they have a lot of issues. That's not one of them. Meaning that those are, meaning what I'm saying is the people who are beyond, I guess. So what you're saying is the Gen X 50s are now looking at this like,
Right.
where's next job?
Right. And they want, and I think that they're seeing their cost of living has exploded to have the lifestyle that they want, and they're saying, "Oh shit, I'm not retiring at 65. That would be untenable. I just don't have it, and now I got to be thinking I'm working till at least 70. And if you're 53, and at one point 65 was your end line, that's 12 years away. You can make that. But if you're looking now 17 years away, that's a long time. And to have something that you can be secure in for 17 years in this economy, with all the talk about how AI is going to eviscerate white collar jobs, there's a lot of nervous people. I mean, a real lot of nervous people out there. I mean, I have friends that are coders for Wells Fargo and UBS, and they're like, I've gotten rid of half of my team already, and I've got AI doing the coding, and my job is just to sign off on it so that they have me to fire or fix it if something goes wrong. But they're not even bringing in the number of coders that they used to from India and stuff. They're just like, it's not worth it. We can have AI do it, and they're thinking there's going to come a point where AI is going to be able to manage the coding applications.
Well,
Uh,
look, I see, my kids are headed to college, but friends' kids who are in college. I mean, it's the talk of all of these guys, which is, what can I do that is AI resistant? Nothing, what can you do where you're not just laying down and saying, hey, this
I mean,
computer coding being one of them, sadly, but where can you bring your expertise that is going to be, um, somewhat immune to what's coming at us.
Let me give you a perfect example. My nephew is going off to college to be an engineer next year at the University of Rhode Island. He was going to focus on manufacturing engineering, and has decided to move into electrical engineering. And he's like, you know what? It's engineering. I can get. He's like, I'm not going to be an electrician. I'm going to be able to plot out a data center. That's that's the same type of engineering that I would want to do. He's working for Lockheed Martin now in their drone program, and he would have loved to stay with that. He's like, but I'd rather get a 4-year degree and work towards a PhD in electrical engineering, because that's going to give me a lot more opportunities in the future than being tied to mechanical engineering, which who knows where that's going to take me. But I know they're going to need electricians or people familiar with electrical grids in the next 100 years. So that's going to be my focus in the next 4 years. He's making a smart decision, I think.
Well, let's land this plane with a downer, sadly, which is okay. So what happens? To me, there's been a time bomb with universities charging these absurd tuitions, right? And I forget what the top universities, they will find ways with the elite players to find jobs somewhere. But once you leave the elite universities, the fact that second tier universities are still charging $80,000 a year, there's, I think that we are going to see a moment, almost like what you saw with the fraudulent for-profit trade schools, where these universities may not be fraudulent for-profits, but if they're charging the rates they're charging with it, and just basically with 50% or more admissions rates, basically anybody who signs up can go. What's going to happen for population that's coming out with multi-$100,000 debt without the opportunities? Because even if AI doesn't eliminate all jobs, there'll still be jobs, let's say, God willing, that people are going to figure out a way that they fit into this economy. It doesn't look like it will be the same volume of jobs. It's almost like what we saw with law schools. And we both came out, there was a period where, you could get a job at big law. When I was there, the rule of thumb, I was at sort of the not top tier, not bottom tier, sort of, top 20 school. The top 10 to 20% got big law jobs. And then as it got tighter, it was 10%, 5%. Then it sort of expanded a little bit. But if we're at the point, similarly, by analogy, that the people coming out of universities, the top 10% get jobs and everybody else doesn't get a meaningful job that has a chance to pay back what somebody's invested in, whether they had the money or didn't, are we going to see a reckoning when it comes to what is the path out of college for people?
I think it's the conversations have already started. I mean, the reality is that a lot of colleges now, at least from what I am hearing from other people and my little bit of exposure, is come for the education, but develop the relationships that are going to get you your job. And that's what some of the colleges that my cohort are looking at are getting pitched. They're getting pitched. Not only will you get the education that you need, but we can open doors for you. We can get you in places and that type of thing.
I just call when you looked at jobs in a good job market or a law school, the placement offices at universities, unless you're in those elite, top of Wharton, yes, there was a job placement.
But the people who are at the top of Wharton don't need. It's like career services at any law school. It's help for people who don't need help. But
yes, but what happens when you're at that second tier university? You're paying real tuition. They have no, maybe they have one great alumnus who has a few jobs there, but even the great companies right now are in this downturn. And again, it's not just what I'm saying is, and the reason why I'm is that not only is it a downturn in the number of slots out there, will they be retooled? Yes. People become plumbers, or there are only so many of those slots out there. I mean, you can always find a way and compete, but I am really concerned that the money being spent by people to go through those programs, to say that the network around you, yes, but then, how should you be evaluating your school, in the sense that it takes a long time for your cohort to get large enough for that network to matter.
Yeah.
I was at a big nonprofit event the other day and actually bumped into my big brother and little brother from my fraternity. That's 3, 4 decades out of school where we elevated to that point. How, coming out, it's nice, but everybody else is looking for the jobs too.
Right. Yeah, it's a real challenge, and you got to question whether or not investing that amount of money is worth it, because you could take the same amount of money that you would invest into 2 years of college, and you could buy an apartment building and have your kid live in one of the apartments for free and generate maybe 40, 50 grand a year
So
in income. And now you've got 50 grand a year in income and a free place to live, and you're building equity in an apartment building. Everyone's going to need a place to live at some
Well,
point.
I'm going to leave this then. I have a solution for getting the tuition down. It's open source. I hope somebody listening to this steals it. But I truly believe that there's enough free courses out there that if somebody were to come out with Ruane University, right? And Ruane University, you could have an advisor. It costs $3,000 a semester, let's say, something nominal that pays for somebody. You're going to pick your classes off of what's available for free from MIT, from Harvard, from Penn, from all these schools. You get your classes. You will have software on your computer that says what percentage of the classes you attended. You got to see you have to attend more than 65 or 70% of the hours of classes. And then this tuition would go towards somebody would create tests, maybe through AI now. It's a new thing that's out there. It may be essays, but that you would have basically be graded on these free classes in some third party way that you
Seth,
would
it
then be.
exists. It exists already.
Yes, and
Go to modernstates.org. You
right.
can take up to like 40
No,
different
no,
classes,
but the idea
all
that you would then
free, and
right.
you get college credit for it.
Understood. And what I'm saying is I want somebody to take those and those grades and or watching time to show, because I would argue that I would take a candidate from Ruane University where somebody has shown that they've done that, the rigor of going through 4 years of those classes, to any of the nonsense you see from a private online university where
Sure.
somebody's paid tens of thousands of dollars, that there is that we could basically, I mean, we had a babysitter nanny back in the day. All she needed was a degree. And it was amazing because the least amount was so high for just somebody who said, I want to check the box and say, I've
Yeah.
done this, I have my BA. And if there was a way to get people something that the world, the employers would see as a value, that's the difference, right? You can't
Right.
just be like, it's a bunch of free classes, but if it was free classes that were leveraged into something that showed that you did the reading, you wrote the papers, you took a test to show you knew this, whatever, look, you get as sophisticated as even having work groups by class, and
Yeah.
but the idea that the free things that were out there could be used not just as an anecdotal to learn, but to check that box for a BA. That, look, maybe Ruane University is not going to be as prestigious as a top 20 school, but I would argue I'd take that any day over the for-profits that are just taking advantage of people with nonsense. Because it's sort of like when the kids get a snow day and they say, hey, we're going on Zoom. Well, my kid's individual teacher may not be great on Zoom, but there's one algebra teacher countywide. If you could have the best history teacher in the country teaching those classes, why would you imagine who's showing up at that for-profit university as the history professor? They're going to be arguably any good, likely.
Right.
So,
I love it. I mean, I'm going to look, my kids are today using modernstates.org. They're taking a biology class. They're starting, and they're going to get their college credits for biology and Spanish this summer. I mean,
right. So the question, could you take an entire curriculum that way rather than like a tier C online university?
right.
That's what I hope.
Cool. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week on the Law Firm Blueprint. Thanks for joining us. Of course, you can take us anywhere you need to go by following us on your podcast platform of choice by searching up the Law Firm Blueprint podcast. And of course, catch us live on LinkedIn, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, every Thursday, as well as in our Facebook group, the Law Firm Blueprint. That's going to do it for me. I'm Jay Ruane. He's Seth Price. Bye for now.